let's delve into the program, and let me introduce now our first keynote speaker, Bogna Konior, who will take us to a dark forest, but also to a computer-generated world where avatars of artworks and visitors float together, and where wormholes reveal hidden narratives. Among others, on the structure of the internet, if I'm right, Bogna, about this. And just very briefly, to introduce Bogna, she's an assistant professor of media theory at the Interactive Media Arts Department at the New York University Shanghai, where she also co-directs the AI and Culture Research Center. And she's also the co-editor of the forthcoming volume, Machine Decision is Not Final, China and the History of Future of Artificial Intelligence. So thank you very much, Bogna, that you are here with us today. And please start streaming that we can hear you.
So thank you everyone for having me. Going to address the question of Web3 and Web2 and transparency through the question of darkness. So please join me. I'm gonna jump straight into it. Imagine it is the 1990s and the sky is the color of a television tuned to a dead channel. Nerds, freaks, geeks, and punks get hooked on a new technology, once hidden in the basements of universities, but now going mainstream. They called it the cyberspace, a term coined by writer William Gibson, or more aptly, they called it the web. The web heralded an end and a beginning. The Cold War was over. The Soviet Union failed in bringing to life its own competing vision of the internet, a Promethean, romantic, and utopian top-down system of efficient economic distribution that was supposed to prove that communism was better than capitalism, but they lost. What won was a schizophrenic system of ebbs, flows, and disjunctions, a technology that twists and turns the whole world into strange connections. And in fact, the network emerges as a defining word of this era. The early internet culture is libertarian, anarchic. The cyberspace is imagined as wild and free, where we, under the camouflage of avatars, would be able to escape the social determinism of identity and prejudice and create a real counterculture. Now, fast forward a mere decade. After every investor in America poured money into so-called dot-com companies, in the early 2000s, the bubble burst. No one could figure out how to make money on the internet, and the technology was proclaimed a fluke, briefly, like just another hype going nowhere. And yet, a few companies like Google, Amazon, and Wikipedia figured it out. The key to their success: make the websites interactive and customizable, track and trace what users do with them, encourage them to post things about themselves, sell predictions based on this data to advertisers, see your money stack up. Within a few years, the paradigmatic website of the so-called Web 2 is something called the Facebook. Facebook, where cyberpunks of the 20th century dreamt of no faces, of anonymous and subversive roleplay. In the 21st century, the users of Web 2 plaster their faces all over the internet, trying to define their profiles in as much detail as possible. Here I am, this is exactly who I am and what I like. Scholar Elisha Lim describes how what we talk today about as identity politics is better called identity economics, where your capital is defined by the way an advertiser might see you. That is, an advertising profile Facebook might keep on you, which reduces you to your likes, preferences, and demographics. But it becomes also our way of self-identification, and it's what we literally sell to Facebook. so it can optimize our feeds better and make more money. Now, fast forward another decade. First through the grapevine and rumors whispered in private group chats, then as full-on hype hysteria in the press, the term Web3 is everywhere. In the words of Stephen Deal, the Web3 bubble was one of the most bizarre events I've ever witnessed. In the span of a week, people and tech press started to hallucinate about a technology which patently did not exist and which no one could describe. The only comparable thing would be the dancing manias of the 17th century, mysterious and to this day unexplained events that involved thousands of people dancing erratically until collapsing from exhaustion. But it was a dream of another way, or of Web 1 done correctly this time, a decentralized network of anonymity where demographics or identities would not play a central role anymore. No more identity economics, up with decentralized and opaque networks. Last year, I tweeted, frustrated with the language of Web 2, I don't want free speech. I want a web that doesn't correlate to meat space and doesn't turn everything into a popularity contest, narcissism saddled with dopamine addiction. Anonymize it, make our eyeballs and nervous systems sovereign, no more identity economics. But could it really be so? To answer it, perhaps we need to think about how Web 2 actually works. A few years back, I messaged my friend on Signal about witnessing another so-called shitstorm online on Twitter. I wrote, everyone is in total hysteria mode again. Why is it that the most level-headed people you know lose their minds in flame wars online? We are in a chain of endless suspicion and conflict. Why is it so? I am working on a text called The Dark Forest Theory of the Internet to explain it. It will be about the logic of Web 2, but rather than focusing on the content and who is an asshole and who said what, I want to write an hyper-deterministic thought experiment where humans have virtually no free will in online interactions. Marshall McLuhan already told us that the medium is the message, but Web 2 has us freaking out about messages all the time. Even those who know about the attention economy and how the algorithm rigs your brain towards outrage or seeking engagement from others, they fall for it. But it is not our fault that we do, because I think there is a dynamic tied to communication in general, not only online communication, that is as inescapable as gravity. If you trip over a bench and fall, that is not gravity acting maliciously, but when someone is attacking me online, I imagine they are acting maliciously, even though maybe it is the same process as gravity. And additionally, by describing such a limit, I will move away from a popular idea in progressive theories, which is that human interactions are completely dependent on social structures or platforms that they play out on, and therefore changing the structure is enough to changing the dynamic. What if it isn't? That's why all that we ever write about is resistance as the only dynamic, but I want to chart the limits of our agency to understand our situation better. And I finish, perhaps it is because I grew up reading Polish intellectuals revising their notion of our agency, capability, and freedom under the Soviet occupation, after they all witnessed how and why revolutions fail. But perhaps the West is still on an uphill path towards a revolution, not on a bad trip that follows it, where the question people were preoccupied with is how to continue living as humans, knowing that some form of conflict is always inescapable. So that text happened and was eventually developed for an exhibition called The Black Market by artist Andrzej Szkółka, where the focus was on large inhuman systems operating autonomously from human agency and control. And what I wanted to explore in it is how behind the ceaseless exchange of arguments, selfies, and viral videos of political events on Web 2 is a giant automated machine, an extraction process that reduces all of us to the information that we generate. Think about the pods in the Matrix, where each human was enclosed, and the machines harvested them for energy, we are also harvested for the continued existence of Web 2. The dark forest theory of the internet. In the 1990s, cyberculture theorist Mark Fisher wrote a theory of cyberspace as a prosthesis of humanity, a cybernetic nature, and an extension of our nervous system. He noticed that our situation right now is quite gothic. We are commingling with inorganic agents, and perhaps we are even possessed by a computer rhythm. We are the zombies, the undead, and the puppets at the end of the strings, with algorithmically curated content dictating the rhythm of our thoughts and the substance of our opinions. As Lev Manovich already noticed, our thoughts are downstream from what the machine selects for us on the screen. Our endorphin channels and social relations come second to our addiction to machine stimulants. In 1991, Donna Haraway already observes the shift of scale in human culture after computation. What before was just a person becomes now part of a system. Human relations turn into the language of socio-technical management. Organism becomes population, and human itself is replaced by communication. The internet alike is a system. It's a systemic illusion of interiority and of identity, but it only appears to be ours. As Fisher writes, this doesn't work by suppression. It compels your participation, but it doesn't represent you. It doesn't even manipulate you. It substitutes for you. Even so, the thoughts on the screens appear to be ours. Think about the original Facebook prompt. What's on your mind? Such a big philosophical question, such a provocation. It prompts us to think that we have an individual mind online, where the truth is that with each post we become a node in the giant machine-human hive mind. Our thoughts archived on the screen fortify the hallucination of a stable self, an individual, sustained by the interface through which we communicate. In such a prison of interiority, everything hinges on us, and yet no one feels any agency. No wonder that neuroses and anxiety underlie our culture. Everything is internalized. Even the weather and the fate of the planet feels down to us. And yet we can do only what the medium affords us: externalize, communicate, feeding and growing the so-called internet. By giving undue attention to the content of what we do online and what we say and who we are, we miss a bigger picture. Mark Fisher says, it is not only that you deceive yourself, it is also that you are deceived about having a self online. Through this appeal to the personal, communication becomes impulsive and appears harmless, even if the internet might serve an impersonal, machinic function entirely. We may recall that William Burroughs once wrote that language itself might be a virus from the outer space, here to control our minds and breed itself further, only using us as a container. Maybe the internet is similar. It's such an alien invasion too, but by capital. In the end, for the online platforms, humans are not as important as the memes that we carry, the information that can be extracted and monetized for the continued growth of increasingly autonomous and intelligent networks. The computers let us see everything but act on very little. Our very agency is by definition a constant seeing, a constant gluing of eyeballs and nervous systems to the screen. The more the world can be described through such complexity and emergent machinic behavior, and the more we learn even from science that maybe free will and causality might be shaky and we are not in control of what happens to our brains online, the more we seem committed to reasserting dogmatically textual descriptions of our thoughts and morals online. If only we expressed ourselves clearly, we think, surely the politics and ethics of the world would fall into place. But we cannot just enter into an active network like that and hope for a straightforward exercise of politics. And so our impotence seems to be, no matter what I say or do, all I think about is extracted. Behind any cute content I share online is an automated extraction process that reduces every single one of us to the complexity and conflict that we can generate. This extraction process is not unique to the internet, but could be a cosmic law. The terms associated with Web 2, such as personal website, social media, profile, avatar, or the Internet of You, focus on interiority. It is all about you, and it is all about humans. But we can have a theory of communication that grasps how human exchanges are framed by laws that are not strictly social, and maybe that's what we need to understand first before rebuilding towards something like Web 3. Chinese science fiction writer Liu Cixin authored a trilogy titled Remembrance of the Earth's Past. This trilogy abounds in ideas about the nature of communication and how communication connects us to dynamics actually larger than us. So language is human, but the patterns of communication itself are inhuman. They are dictated by the laws of physics and even by the cosmos itself. It's interesting that among all human nations that still exist, it is China that prides itself on the longest history of astronomy and currently invests resources in extraterrestrial communication research. Even today, the phrase Tianming, the mandate of heaven, is used to describe whether Chinese rulers have legitimacy to rule. Though the books are not about the internet at all, they are more so about the heavens. Liu's work on cosmic sociology, informed by physics on the one hand and the Cold War on the other, allow me to develop a theory of information extraction grand in scale and to outline automated dynamics tied to online communication, where human intent or any specific content being communicated do not really matter. The central concept of Liu's novels is dark forest theory. He says anything that participates in information exchange, humans or any life form, has to answer to the laws of thermodynamics. Each system, such as the internet, progresses towards high entropy, that is, towards disorder. Conflict is one of the fastest ways to progress towards disorder, and so everything progresses towards conflict. Communication is a fantastic tool for producing conflict. In simple human terms, we would say, put 3 people in a room together and you have 10 conflicting ideas. That is exactly how communication produces high entropy. Because communication is loaded with potential conflict, acts of talking to each other are always reckless, like shining light in a dark forest and attracting predators. This is why in the novels, any intelligent species actually is cautious to not contact another. It's like a flipped Fermi paradox. Rather than asking, why is the universe silent? We ask, why the hell are you shouting? That is, the novels tell us the universe is not noisy and we don't hear from anyone else because they are intelligent enough to stay silent. They know communication is dangerous. And perhaps that's what humans could learn too. This theory flips the underlying assumption that intelligence is always about talking better, thinking about better phrases, and thinking about better ways. It actually says communication is a sign of stupidity. But on the other hand, communication is something we evolved for our survival. We cannot distinguish between being able to communicate and being able to survive. And so we are in a paradox with no exit. The desire to communicate is necessary, and yet it produces conflict. This is an automated process that we cannot get out of. Though in the novels, humanity makes such a discovery late, for cosmic civilizations, this is essentially an amoral proposition. It's an automated law of physics, and everyone obeys it. Some might call this very cold, even nihilistic, And yet what it does is trying to generalize the laws of physics to arrive at a cosmic game theory of communication, as suited to thinking about first contact with aliens as it is to thinking about contact on social media. In this way, just like war or conflict distributes entropy, Web 2 is just a method for distributing entropy. It incentivizes us to produce complex and compulsive communication and dissipates entropy through conflict. The high concentration of noise online is not simply a result of bad choices or wrong ethics, but an inescapable outcome tied to a high entropy scenario. And so, to build towards Web 3, we might say that in Web 2, on a personal, intimate scale, the internet is a technology for instant communication, but on a large scale is something like a technology for cosmic war and for entropy extraction, colliding us against one another. So I want to go to the next slide, but how do I do it? Just a moment. I'm almost done. So some informed thoughts about Web 3 in light of this. Going beyond individuality, beyond communication, beyond disorder, beyond conflict, what is actually possible? If Web 1 is anonymity and no data money, and Web 2 is pseudonymity or real-life identity with data money, and Web 3 is heralded as anonymity plus still data money, that makes us think, so can encryption and anonymity and secrecy actually offset entropy and offset conflict that we seem to be caught in? If what we do not like about digital capitalism is the monetization of prediction and perpetuation of identity economics through consumer profiles, something to consider about Web 3 is whether it extracts data in a way that's unchained from personalization. So the dark forest mechanism would still run because it is tied to communication and that conflict is inescapable. But if it's not tied to profiles and identities, it doesn't run on us. It might run on our impersonal alter egos. I say in this tweet from August, everyone should be known under 1,000 names and have bots based on themselves run rogue online to make all browsing data junk and disable advertising algorithms. It might be an effective form of camouflage against algorithms that want to package and sell every thought, opinion, and political stance you have, and profile you to either cease having opinions and stay silent altogether, silence being the measure of intelligence, or to automate the opinion having. Value then becomes speculative, with bots talking to bots, talking to bots, talking to advertising bots, selling and purchasing things in an automated manner, like high-frequency trading, but for the internet. And perhaps underneath all that, we find an escape route and an exit. Perhaps we camouflage under the bots, and perhaps what they produce we can distribute differently, given that it would not be tied to any one identity or any one person. And perhaps this is just a dancing mania and a countercultural fever dream, but it is a dream nonetheless. And I will stop here.